In this video, I want to show you, give you a little extra help on the homework that you're going to be working on. This is one of the parts you'll be creating for homework. It is a part from a previous exam, and this part uses an awful lot of the feature creation tools that we have shown you this week in lab. But we haven't shown you a lot of sketching tools yet, and so I just want to show you a couple of simple sketching tools that'll make this part much easier, much more manageable. So this is the front view, top view, right view, and isometric view of the part, and you can see all the features that are part of it. We're going to be giving you this picture, but we'll also be giving you this detailed view of the part. Let me drag that into place, and you can see that this drawing is loaded with dimensions. And so this is where you'll be looking up and finding the dimensions for the part. And this simpler sketch is where you will get just the overall understanding of the geometry that's there. And what I want to do is start off by sketching the outer boundary, which represents the bulk of this part, and just show you how to read this drawing with all the details on it that I showed you a second ago, to learn how to make the part, and a few sketching tools. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new part. I'll do it with File, New. I'll select a part, OK, and then I'm going to make sure that this part is set up in metric units. And so we've done this plenty of times before, so we'll go to units and set it up in metric units, millimeters, and I'll say OK on that dialog box. Now we're in millimeters, and I'm going to create the first extruded boss base, and I'm going to do that by sketching on the front plane. And the geometry that I want to create is this thing, which looks like a triangle, a little more than a triangle with curved edges to it. And so there are lots of ways that this thing could be created. What I'm going to do is look at the sketch with dimensions on it and learn a few things about this part. I can see in this view that this part is an overall 100 millimeters wide. It is 30 millimeters deep. And now this shape that I'm going to be sketching right here, there is no dimension to the top of this circular piece. But notice there is a dimension of 40 to the center of this circle. And then over here we have radiuses of everything. And this is a radius of 20. And this radius at the top of the part is at the same center as this hole. So what I'm going to do is sketch the outer part, sketch that circular hole at the middle of the part, and then do a little bit of constraining work to control how this arc at the top interacts with that circle. Another thing I'll note is these flanges around this part are 3 millimeters thick, so we'll come back to that a little bit later. And so what I'm going to do first of all is create a line, and I'm going to let that line, I want it to be on the same height as the center of my coordinate system, so I'm going to let that projection line stand, and I'm going to click there. Then I'm going to move over to the right, and I'm going to allow my line to be horizontal. And so I've just created a horizontal line. Now I'm going to move up a little bit, and then I'm going to move over, and I'd like the top of my line, or the endpoint of this line, to be right above the center of my coordinate system. I want the endpoint of this line to be right above that endpoint. Notice I'm not worrying about angles and other things. And then I want to close my sketch. And I've just used lines at this point. I'm going to hit escape. And now what I want to do is some constraining. And it's things we'll show you in a bit more detail next time. But I want to do some things like claim that these two lines have to be of equal height. So let's do a constraint. I'm going to click on this line, and I'm going to hold down Control and click on this second line. And then I notice down here that equal is one of the options. I'm going to make those two lines of equal length. Okay. Then another thing, and I'm going to accept that. Another thing that I want to do is to find the midpoint of this line, because I want this all of this to be symmetric about this coordinate system. I'm going to find the midpoint of this line and force the midpoint to be at the center of the coordinate system. So I'm going to right click on this line, and I've got to find the midpoint option. It is here. Select midpoint. That's selected. Now I'm going to hold down Control and select the center of the coordinate system. With those 2 points selected, and notice they show up in the box right here, I'm going to click on coincident. That makes those points become the same. And now, with the midpoint of this line hooked to the middle of the coordinate system, this point is right above the midpoint of the coordinates, the center of the coordinate system. I've got some built-in symmetry just from these constraints. Now I'm ready to do a smart dimension of 100 here. I read that from the drawing earlier. And this one moved on me. And so what I'm going to do, I'm not sure why it moved. I thought I had a constraint built in, but I'm going to fix that with a constraint. I'm going to click on this point, hold down Control, and click on the center of my coordinate system and the midpoint of this line, all of it, which is now the same thing. And I don't want this point to become coincident with that point. That would bring them together. I want the 2 points to be vertical. And that restores my symmetry. Do you see all these little green marks all over the place? These marks are indicating the constraints that I've built in. That equal and this equal, number 1, say that those 2 lines are equal. That line says, this vertical line says that line is vertical. If I point to it, it says vertical and vertical. If I point to this one, it says coincident. That says the line is horizontal. That says coincident. Midpoint, vertical. The constraints that I've created are there. Okay, next thing that I want to do, now that I've got this thing in the neighborhood of the right size, is create a circle. So I'll go to the circle tool. There are several kinds of circle tools. I'll click on circle. I'd like to place the circle so that its center is right above the origin of our coordinate system. So by allowing that line to project down, and I click on the center and I drag away with no mouse down, and I click somewhere, and then I could type in a dimension now. I'm just going to go ahead and go to Smart Dimension, click on the circle, pull away, and if I look at the drawing, and I'm going to pull the drawing back in for just a second, let's find the size of that circle. And if we look carefully at all of these different radiuses, where do we find an arrow that ends on that circle? And the answer is right here. That's a diameter of 15, and that arrow ends at that inner circle. So I'm going to dimension that to a diameter of 15. 1.5. Oops, I got to click back into this program. 1.5. Enter. And that is about right. Now, let's see. Let's get some other dimensions off of this thing. Looking at this corner with an enlarged view, I see that I have, and this is a little, you want to look at this very carefully. You're going to see a curve here, but also 2 straight lines. And what's been dimensioned to a dimension of 10 is the intersection of those 2 straight lines, is a dimension of 10. That sets the height of that side part. And so I'm going to smart dimension that line to a height of 10. Okay, and now it appears that this thing is way too tall, but we will deal with that in just a moment. Let's see, by creating a radius, and it is this top radius right here, that says that has a radius of 20 measured from the center of that circle. Okay, and so what I'm going to do, and we haven't done this yet, I'm going to create a thing called a fillet. We looked at fillet features. This is a very similar thing, but it applies in sketches, and it creates a fillet curve. So I'm going to create a sketch fillet, and it's going to involve this end of this line and that end of that line, and I can see it previewing for me. And I want a radius of 20 millimeters, and that gives me that fillet. You can see it in yellow. I will accept it, and I can see the radius of 20 showing up for that dimension. Now, about the only thing wrong with this sketch is that I want this point, which is the center of that fillet radius, to be at the center of this circle. And so I'm going to do that by clicking on that point, and I'm going to hold down Control and click on the center of the circle. And I'm not sure why it offers the word merge rather than coincident, but I'm going to merge them. Okay, and in this case the circle moved because I had not yet dimensioned the center of the circle. I just forgot, but it's not going to hurt anything. The order is not important, and so I'm going to accept that. And now what I want to do is smart dimension the distance from that point to that line, and I will pull that out there, and that distance on the drawing is given as a 40. Let me point that out to you. Right there, that 40 is the distance from the center of the circle to the bottom of the part. And so I'll type in a 40. And I'm almost done. I still need a fillet at these corners, but everything so far, everything is black, right? But I still need to create a little geometry, and so I'm going to do a fillet at this corner between those two lines. It says I'm in trouble, and I understand, but I do want to continue, but I'm going to change this to the right number, and we'll go find the size of that fillet. And right here it says that this fillet has a radius of 10, not 20. And that's why I was in trouble, because of that 20 that's sitting right here. So there's a radius of 10, and I'm going to accept that one, but I'm going to put another one while I'm at it right there. It said the same thing, but oh, okay, what's happening is I've dimensioned to that intersection point, and it's saying that intersection point's going away. I'm going to accept that. My sketch is black. We'll zoom in a little bit and take a close look at it, and I believe I've got everything I need in that sketch. That sketch is done. Now I'm going to extrude by doing an extruded boss base with that sketch. And in preparation for things to come, I'm going to be smart, not by extruding blind a width of 30, because there's an awful lot of symmetry on this part. So I sketched on, so I'm going to presume that my front plane sketch is actually in the center of the part, and I'm going to do a mid-plane extrusion. We saw that last time. So I'm going to not do a blind, I'm going to do a mid-plane and type in the total width of 30. But with that, it creates 15 on each side of the mid-plane, and having that front plane there in the middle of the part is going to be convenient later. Okay, the one other thing that I want to show you, and it involves sketches, so I'm going to do a sketch. So I'm going to say, I'm going to do an extruded cut. So let me go to extruded cut. I'm going to sketch on that face and view perpendicular. And I'm going to use a very powerful tool called, let's see, let me find it. Okay, offset entities. It'll take existing geometry and offset it by a certain distance. So I'm going to click on offset entities, and I'm going to point to that edge that's on the part and give it a click. And let's see, this isn't behaving the same way that it did for me earlier, but I know first of all that I want to offset 3 millimeters, and I want to reverse Okay, and you know, last time I did this, it went all the way around. I don't quite remember what it takes to get them all, but I'll just do the clicks because that certainly always works. And I have created that geometry, and I will accept it, and I will, and notice it's all black. Only one dimension of size 3 was needed to create this interior geometry. It did 3 millimeters all the way around. The sketch is black. I will accept it. Now, the cut that I intend to do, let's look at our drawing. And you have to look carefully to find it. Let me remember where it is. Here's a note. It says this web is 5 millimeters thick. It's not showing up anywhere else but that, so you've got to scan the drawing carefully for information about the size. This web is 5 millimeters thick. If that's the case, then if I'm going to do my cut, first of all, I don't want to go past the midplane. I want to stop before the midplane 2.5 millimeters. So my cut is going to end, I could do the calculation of 30 divided by 2. This is 30 divided by 2 is 15. Then minus half the thickness of the web is 2.5. And that would get me to a 12.5. I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, I'm going to use offset from surface. Now we haven't shown you this yet. I'd like to get to my front plane, but it's not visible. Over here is a collapsed model tree. If I click on it, I can find stuff that's already created here, and I'm going to use the front plane, and I want to offset from my front plane 2.5 millimeters. And so my cut does not go all the way through the part. It stops 2.5 millimeters away from the front plane, and that is that cut. I've made that pocket. Now, one of the tools, now I could go do the exact same thing on the other side, but if it's the exact same thing and it's on, quote, the other side, one of the tools that we showed you today in our lesson would make creating this pocket on the other side quite easy. But as a matter of fact, if you look at the part, there's a whole lot of stuff that we haven't created yet on this side that eventually will also go to the other side. And so it's probably better to go ahead and create a bunch of the stuff that's on this side and then use that sneaky tool that I'm not telling you about, I'm not naming it for you, to move all of that stuff to this side as well. And so that's the end of this video. And now what have I shown you? I've shown you fillets. Okay, I've shown you fillets. I've shown you a lot of constraints. Click on one, control click on the other, force them to behave the way you want them to behave. And I've shown you the offset entities is the main things that I've shown you. And so that would end this video.